Nelson was soon at war again. A battle with the Danes at Copenhagen in April 1801 was a very bloody conflict, made famous by Nelson's apparent turning a blind eye to orders. Characteristically, Nelson did ignore an order to cease action, but the story that he put a telescope to his blind eye is a myth. For the next 18 months, Nelson enjoyed a quiet life with Emma and his baby daughter. But on the 18th of May, 1803, France, under Napoleon Bonaparte, once again declared war on Britain. A French invasion was now a very real threat, and Nelson's domestic idyll was shattered forever. By 1805, a great naval showdown between Britain and the French and Spanish Allied force was inevitable, and Nelson prepared to go to war. As always, he ensured that all his affairs were in order, but on this occasion, he took time to have his name engraved on a coffin. That September, Nelson finally set off from Portsmouth on board his flagship HMS Victory, bound for a point of land called Trafalgar on the Spanish coast. What was to follow would be one of the greatest battles in naval history. Nelson's fleet was outnumbered by the French and Spanish 33 to 27. But in terms of experience, the British were far superior. Nelson planned his innovative strategy for the battle ahead. He coined the phrase, the Nelson touch, to describe his tactics for a sudden and decisive attack.
What Nelson does at Trafalgar is to brief his commanding officers well in advance of the actual engagement. He gives them a simple set of instructions, a guideline, a framework, if you like, which will enable them to operate without further control.
Nelson completed his battle plan, asked one of his men to witness his will, and said goodbye to his fellow officers before taking up position off Trafalgar. By the 20th of October, the fleets were only 9 miles apart.
On the morning of the battle, it was very calm around the ship. The sea was dead calm. There was hardly any wind. Nelson was composed, totally confident of victory. All his personal affairs were in order, and his mind was now completely focused on the job in hand, to destroy the French and Spanish fleets.
Nelson appeared on the quarterdeck of HMS Victory wearing his undress uniform, covered with the stars of all the orders he had won over the years. At 11:15 a.m., he made his famous signal, "England expects that every man will do his duty." But before Victory could fire a single shot, 8 men and Nelson's secretary were dead next to him. The battle had begun, and the Nelson touch was put into full force.
What we see at the Battle of Trafalgar are the various aspects of Nelson, a naval hero, all coming to the fore. And he decides, instead of engaging in parallel lines, this time to break his fleet up into 2 columns and to bisect the French and the Spanish fleet into 2 places. What he was then anticipating was a melee battle, when individual British ships would engage individual French and Spanish ships.
Nelson's strategy was a success. The line was broken.
His tactics were unconventional. The way they were executed was as a result of the way he had been able to create an ethos, a winning feeling within the British fleet.
But then disaster struck. Nelson, unmissable as he strode around Victory's quarterdeck in his glittering uniform, insisted on leading one of the columns into the French and Spanish line.
Many of his officers actually tried to dissuade him from doing that, saying that he should be further back, but no, he was determined to lead, which made him an obvious target. It would have been rather more strange had he not been shot than the fact that he was shot.
The bullet struck Nelson's left shoulder and descended into his chest, shattering his spine.
Nelson was and carried below. He was absolutely certain that he was done for. He knew that his back was broken. He complained of being very thirsty, at times of being cold. And all this, of course, whilst the battle was raging around him.
Nelson was taken to Victory's lowest deck. There were French surrenders. The crew cheered. Nelson asked to see his flag captain, Hardy.
He's visited by Captain Hardy, and when Hardy is there, they are friends. They've known each other a long time. In his dying moments, there is that affection is shown, and he asks Hardy to kiss him.
It's been suggested that Nelson said kismet, but that's probably an invention by the late Victorians, who found the episode somewhat embarrassing. He was a ruthless, determined fighter, but a very human man, and he knew that he was about to die, and he needed some demonstration of affection.
There is no doubt that Nelson did ask Hardy to kiss him, and Hardy, in fact, kisses him twice.
Nelson declared that he was leaving Lady Hamilton and his daughter as his bequest to the nation. He thanked God that he had done his duty, which he repeated continuously until, 3 hours after he had first been hit, he opened his eyes, looked up, and died. It took until the 6th of November for news of Nelson's death and his victory at Trafalgar to reach London. His body was brought back, preserved in brandy. According to myth, sailors drank from the cask, believing it to be Nelson's blood. Nelson's funeral was held on a brilliant January morning. 30,000 troops lined the path of the funeral cortege, which took 3.5 hours to reach St. Paul's. There were 7,000 mourners. As was the custom, neither Fanny nor Emma attended. Nelson was a complex leader, with a passionate belief in his ability to become a hero. His naval genius and the romantic legend he helped to create fascinated a nation and propelled him into Britain's Hall of Fame.
He'd become a public hero, a public figure, and by dying in his greatest hour, he was effectively immortalized.